Well, it's one thing to talk about the gospel spreading, but many leaders of churches are wondering how on earth can they move this sleepy congregation to be ambassadors for Jesus Christ? How can they mobilise their church for evangelism? And actually, in Wales, where I happen to be sitting at the moment, there are quite a lot of lively ministers who are working in churches that are asleep. And it's very hard to mobilise these, so I don't underestimate the difficulties. But here's some suggestions. First of all, I've got to model evangelism myself. It is no good my trying to tell people how to spread the gospel if I'm not spreading the gospel. I've got to make this a priority in my own life. And it's really got to be a priority. I remember when I was appointed to a church in Oxford, it had quite a big student congregation, and I met them on the first Friday evening, I think it was, and in the course of getting to know them a bit, I said I thought of doing a bit of open-air preaching in the street outside St Aldate's Church, a big busy crossroads in the middle of Oxford. And one of them drew himself up to his full 5'6" height and said, Mr. Green, we do not do open-air work in this church. And I realised that that was a critical moment at the very beginning of my ministry. And so I said, don't we? Well, we're going to tomorrow, and what's more, you are going to be there. And he was. And now that man is in the ministry. So it's pretty crucial to model it. If you're in a small church and you lead 2 or 3 people to faith and they start coming to church, the regulars will say, hey, somebody's sitting in my seat, and who are these new people? I haven't seen them before. And they'll soon discover that these are people that you have led to faith, and it begins to become infectious. I think the second thing that you want to do, if you're a leader in a church and trying to move it into evangelism, is not to bother about evangelism at all, but to concentrate very much on warming up the climate in the church. Because the gospel is infectious. It's like an infectious disease. And when people see a church that is full of love and vitality and unselfishness and hospitality and so on. I mean, last night I was suddenly switched from one house to another. And because they're Christians, they took me in with great warmth and everything. Now, that sort of thing, at the drop of a hat, that is highly impressive. And it's not how the culture goes today. So you've really got to have a climate of your congregation, however small it is or however big it is. It's got to model something of the love of heaven. And when that's there, however ignorant that congregation may be, it's going to be extremely attractive. So I think that I want to concentrate on the inner building up of the warmth of the church. The next thing, and I suppose alongside that, is I need to teach about the importance of everybody being an ambassador for Jesus Christ. Not, of course, being a preacher. That's different people have those gifts, but most people don't. And every Christian has got a story. It's the story of an intersection between their life and the life of Jesus Christ. And after that intersection, they're not the same as they were before. Their story has changed. And they don't have to have any notes about it or anything. The story is just their story, so it comes bubbling out. And that, I think, is important to train people to give testimony. When you look at the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, you find that the preacher, well, first of all, you've got the massive enthusiasm, dynamism of these people as the Holy Spirit came upon them. There's the attractive congregation. And then you've got Peter preaching. and only one person preaches. But he says, this Jesus God has raised from the dead, and we are all witnesses to it. So they were all witnesses, though he was the preacher. And that's what you want in a congregation, to train people to be witnesses, to be unashamed to the difference Jesus Christ has made in their lives. Many people are highly embarrassed to mention the name of Jesus outside church. The name is usually mentioned as a swear word. But if we are willing and able to just say something about Jesus, that could trigger the interest, which could develop later on into a proper inquiry and then a discovery. So I've got to teach as well as model. And I suppose the third thing that I need to do is to persevere at it. I don't need to do it just once a blue moon. I need to be using the opportunities of my daily life to seek to bring other people to Christ. I remember in this Oxford church, which is very vivid in my mind, I spent 12 years there, and we saw many scores of conversions every year. Part of it would be talking on the cricket field to somebody, walking around the boundary. A part of it would be going into one of the college bars and being the Aunt Sally for all the objections and things that they bring, and constantly coming back to the topic of Jesus Christ. There's all sorts of opportunities in daily life. I remember once a mother coming and asking me to baptize her child, and I said, "Oh, come along to our house and let's have a chat about it." And as we chatted, I found that she wasn't a believer herself, and I had the joy to lead her to Christ. And in due course, we baptized her and the baby at the same time. So opportunities come in the ordinary job of a minister, and I've got to persevere at it. It's got to be seen to be the passion of my life. And then it becomes infectious. People notice it. They want to join in. I think of a consultant in the hospital in Oxford who was highly suspicious of all this to begin with. And I remember taking him on a mission. Actually, it was, if I remember right, it was in Hounslow. I thought it was in Cardiff. It wasn't a Cardiff one, it was a Hounslow one. And there was he sort of in the background taking it all in. And the next time he said, "Can I come again?" And gradually he got thrilled with this. And after a bit, he ran these missions. I didn't do it at all. When people wrote to me and said, "Will you come and do it?" I said, No, but I'll send a team. And he ran the team. So I think this thing does become infectious once you teach it and you model it and you persevere in it. And that leads me on really to another thing. I need to share it. It's no good saying that evangelism is the job of everybody who's a Christian if I don't let it happen. And so how does that happen? Well, it's really very easy. You'll find that in the Christian scene, lots of pastors and vicars and things get invited, and youth leaders get invited to speak somewhere else. And so they tend to say yes, and off they go and do it, and then they come back and get on with their regular job. But what if they say, "Yeah, I'll gladly come and I'll bring 1-2 people with me"? And the people on the other end, they don't mind. They say, "I don't know why he wants to bring people with me, but okay, if he wants to do it, let's do it." Take a car full of people with you. And one person who's only just come to Christ, let him drive the car. Somebody who's been a Christian a bit longer, he can sit in the front seat. You can sit in the back seat with somebody else who's been a Christian a bit longer. And you plan it, you plan the talk between you so that everybody does a bit. And you compare that, you hold it together. You are the glue that holds that talk together. But they've all done part of an outreach talk. They've planned it with you beforehand, and then they come back and they're just bubbling with excitement because they've got into it. And so you would put them on in a slot in the Sunday service the next Sunday, and they spew out their enthusiasm about it. Then other people in the congregation come up to you and say, "Hey, why didn't you take me on this?" and you say, cheer up, I'll take you next time. And so in ways like this, you really do find that you, as you share the gospel and give people a chance to have a go themselves, they will discover what they're best at, and you'll find them doing that without your being there at all. Of course, you need to vary it. You don't want any one note to dominate a concert. It's got to have a whole variety of notes. Well, evangelism, good news, has got to have a variety of notes. And it might be a group of lads after a football match. It might be somebody that is coming for adult baptism. They become believers and you give them some preparation, and then you dunk them in the tank, but all their friends come to watch. And then the customer gets up and gives a testimony as to why he's come to faith, gives you a chance to preach about it. And so there is another way of evangelism, very easily done. And there's lots of ways like that we can use. We used to do a lot in the Openair. Now, Openair preachers have fallen into disrepute. They often have big black Bibles and shout out about being washed in the blood of the Lamb. And I must say for myself, I cross the road to keep out of the way of that lot. But actually it can be done very attractively. And it can be done with juggling and with drama and with circle dancing and things like this that draws a crowd. And then your job is to hold them. And you do it by short, sharp pieces, by interviewing folks, by injecting humour and so on. This is another way, a varied way of spreading the gospel. Another thing you can do is to take those of your congregation who like it away for a weekend. I mean, here we're sitting in Wales at the moment. Why not take them to Borth for a long weekend? And there you've got these marvellous sands, miles of sands, and you've got wonderful things that you can do there. And then morning and evening you have some teaching. And you'll always find that the one-legged pairs turn up. The couple where one is a Christian and the other is not. And by the end of your holiday, you may very well find that somebody else has come to Christ. And you can do it in social ways too. I mean, think of Valentine's Day. Valentine was a Christian martyr, though nobody remembers that these days. And he was. Why not have a Valentine's dance? And in the middle of it, you tell them a bit about love, that love is personal, that love is costly, that love is challenging, that love demands a response. Well, if you can't preach the good news out of that, you ought not to be in business at all. So there's a whole variety of ways in which the gospel can be spread. And when you have something interesting, put them on in church, in the notices or something, to talk a bit about it. And that will inspire other people to use their own initiatives.